Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Maitri podcast between friends, Conversations with Maitri. This is your host, Nandini Ray, and today I have Rachna Khare. Rachna is the executive director of DAYA, a Houston-based nonprofit that serves South Asian survivors of domestic and sexual violence through culturally specific services and educate the community to end the cycle of abuse. Rachna is a founding member of South Asian Youth of Houston Unite and serves on committees for the Houston Immigration Legal Services Collaborative and the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. Rachna serves on the board for the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault, and she is a founding member of SOAR, the South Asian Survivors and Organizations in Alliance and Rising. Rachna, I'm so happy to have you here today on our show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. We love the podcast and we love what you all are doing to build awareness.
Rachna, before we start our conversation, would you please introduce DAYA to the Bay Area audience?
Sure. So DAYA, as you mentioned, is Houston-based, but I imagine, like you all, we see and serve clients from all over, including internationally. Our mission is to provide culturally specific services that can help survivors of all backgrounds, all genders, all income levels reclaim their safety and their independence. Our organization started 25 years ago, 1996, so almost 26 years ago, when a group of Indian American women in our community were, they knew that they wanted to do something to help women specifically help integrate into the community, and they wanted to support women who are South Asian. And there was a tragic murder-suicide in our community right around that time, and that showed them that this was the need, that there were South Asian women out there who needed support, and that is how DAYA began. Today, it started as all volunteer run. Today, we have a staff of 13, including counselors and advocates, and we're here for survivors of all backgrounds.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I personally a great fan of DAYA because Maitri work closely with DAYA, and the work you do is really commendable. And I actively follow your social media pages, and I love the activism and the community engagement work you publish in there. And your survivor-run blog, that is Healing to Peace, is a great initiative. So thank you for doing this great work.
Oh no, we really try to incorporate survivors' voices wherever we can safely, and to uplift, what the reality is. Survivors, any one of us can experience domestic abuse, and it's important that the community know that.
Yeah, and that's so much misconception in the community. We see that many people think that domestic violence can happen to poor class or uneducated class or a specific culture and community. But people should understand, we all must acknowledge that domestic violence can happen to anyone, and it is not victim's fault.
Right.
So and the survivor blog is great.
Yeah, and I think too, recognizing that it's not, it's not always just physical violence, and the impact of the psychological abuse, the financial abuse in our community, as you know, the immigration abuse, and just how damaging it can be, and how that cycle really needs to stop for our entire community to be safer and stronger.
Of course. And speaking of survivors, about a month ago, I listened to a client's testimony, DAYA's client's testimony, and she was sharing her ordeal as a trafficked victim. And in her account, she was thanking DAYA advocates profusely for holding her hand and supporting her at the darkest time of her life. But when I was listening to that story, I not only felt happy for that survivor, but I also felt, it's our victory. It's our, it's all advocates' victory.
Absolutely.
But because when I hear, someone is out of danger, rebuilding his or her life, I feel that it's our collective work, and because we are a team, and together we can end violence against women, domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, and together we can build an inclusive and respectful society. So, thank you so much, Rachna, for sharing that client's testimony with us.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult for survivors to tell their story, like you mentioned. So much victim blaming in not just in our community, but in America overall. Yeah. There's so much victim blaming. And so each time a survivor tells their story, I'm always so inspired, because to me, I find that it makes this experience much more relatable. And then people can see that, oh, this is how it happens. This is how the manipulation and the power and control slowly get taken away. So I'm always incredibly grateful for survivors who share their story. Even now, even after doing this work, each time I find myself learning something new when I talk to survivors.
Yeah, and women are suffering in all cultures, all communities, and victim blaming we see in all culture, all communities. Every culture, we see that domestic violence is happening, violence against women is happening, and victim blaming is also very much present. So to give an idea to our audience that what we are talking about, I would like to play a short clip from that interview that you shared with us, and with your permission. So can I share a clip from that interview?
Absolutely, we would be honored.
Okay.
I came, I left my family. I have, like 3 more siblings, and then I have my both parents living and still living till today. So to me, when I found myself, or when you found yourself in a strange country, you're supposed to communicate with your family. So for me, when I knew that, I was losing control, is when I wasn't allowed to speak to my family anymore.
Wow.
So I knew something, was up. And then I have a child, because I left a child, 8 years old child, that I left, just to serve this man, because, to be a humble servant, because when you work with someone, you're giving your service, so you're serving. So I left my family, my child, and then here I am. I can't even talk to her. I was told not to call them anymore. At first, it was okay, I can call them every 2 weeks. And, after that, it was like, okay, you don't call anymore. I don't know nobody. I don't know anybody. I don't have cell phone. Who was I even gonna call? So that was when I knew that, okay. At that point, I was confused because I didn't know what to do. All I do is cry every day, because how can a mother left her child and you can't even talk to the child? And now my parents don't even know how I'm doing. So my cell phone that I had over there, I thought it's gonna work in the US. I didn't know anything. So when I came, it wasn't working. So when I make a call, they say my dad had a car crash. So because I had a bad dream, and then that was when I called. So when I called, they told me my dad had an accident. So I cried. I was crying all day in that house. Then I had already cooked and everything. And then these people say, what happened? Why are you crying? I said, my dad had accident. Everyone just walk out on me. Nobody could say, how is he feeling? Nobody said what happened. That just zipped my mouth for humans to treat human like that. Oh my goodness. I'm tearing out right now. Daya, I was at the shelter. That part too. From YMCA, I went to the shelter. I stayed in the shelter for almost 6 months. The shelter I was, they don't ever let anybody stay there for 3 months. But I was, blessed and loved by the people at the shelter to have, stayed there for almost 6 months, until God blesses me and I was on my feet, and then I got a place. And I have a friend we met at the shelter, a very good friend, like we became sisters. And we cried together, we laughed together. I have no idea how she came across with Daya. I couldn't ask her till this day. And One day she said, let's go here. I said, I'm not going anywhere because I don't talk to anybody but her. She said, let's go somewhere. I want to take you somewhere. I said, I'm not going anywhere. Where I came from, I don't believe in counseling at all. I had, even me myself, I sat myself down. I said, I'm never going to open up to anybody about myself, my life, or anything I'm going through. Because I went through a lot. People disappoint me all my life. People, when I believe in God, but there's a way you know that, okay, this person is going to help me. And then they end up disappointing me. So I told her, I said, you see me, I don't believe in anybody helping me. I only believe in God. But then how is God going to help you without sending someone your way? And then one afternoon, it was afternoon, I'll never forget. And then she took me. It took a long time for her to convince me to follow her. And then she said, the place is called Daya. And then I was like, Daya, okay. I don't know anything, but trust me. I don't want to go disgrace you there, but I'm not going to say a word there.
Yes.
She said, let's just go. Okay. She said, okay, she do counseling with them. And then she don't want to tell me how much they've helped her, because that is never going to convince me anyway. So let's just go.
So inspiring to watch you rebuild your life with all that, even those experiences that were hard and bad. You've used that. You've used those to just get stronger and just heal. And so it's lovely to see.
Yes. And thank you so much. I want to use this opportunity to say thank you so much to Daya. And honestly speaking, whatever Daya is doing, I pray that, God will continue to bless and bless and bless.
Oh, it's such so powerful story. And I really love that part when the survivor is saying that she knows that she has Daya's support. Daya's advocates are with her and she can share her worry, her concern, her fear, everything with them. And with Daya's support, she's rebuilding her life. And it's so wonderful to hear that part.
Yes, it warmed my heart as well, because as the executive director, you sometimes you don't get to do the one-on-one work with clients as much. So whenever I heard that story, I'm always every day incredibly proud to lead such a phenomenal team of advocates and counselors.
Yeah. And I want to give a big shout out to all the advocates and to all the survivors who have shown resilience.
Yes.
Yeah. So Rachna, at Maitri and Daya, we have seen that when we see the cases of like domestic violence, partner violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, mostly women are victims. And it is not that like our organizational statistics, it's not like Daya statistics or Maitri statistics. If we see local or national or even global statistics, this is the case. So why do you think that mostly women are victims?
I think there's this ancient patriarchy across the globe, right? Where, again, as we've mentioned, every culture across generations and generations have been taught the patriarchy and have been taught that men need to be in charge and strong, and there's more violence associated with being a man and being masculine. And I think actually the patriarchy is not only the reason why we see so many women as victims, but also why even when men are victims, they are probably so afraid to come forward because they are told time and time again, if you're a man, you shouldn't show emotions. You can't cry. You can't, be sad. You can't be scared.
And you cannot seek help.
Exactly. And so the patriarchy, it creates an environment where women are more likely to be abused, and that male victims can't get any support. If you're telling men and women that men should be strong and not show emotion, then, where is the room for love? Where is the room for compassion and healthy relationships? So I really believe that these generations of patriarchy is what is keeping all of us quite unsafe and preventing us from having what could be really beautiful, loving, healthy relationships.
Yeah, and gender inequality and gender abuse are so deeply connected.
Mm-hmm. Right, the earning power of women, and we know in this work that most of the time people have to stay in abusive relationships because they need a roof over their head, because they need food on the table. And with pay inequity, it takes women so much more work to be able to make that same income, especially in families where they're discouraged from working in the first place. I think all of that relates back to the patriarchy.
Yeah, and community ostracism for women, that if you if you're breaking your home, no matter what, even if it is abusive,
yes,
then it's your fault, because
I know, because the home is the woman's
responsibility.
And that's the thing that I like to I wish I could kind of shake our community and say, no, this abuse is what has created a broken family already. And so whenever I see women moving forward and rebuilding a life for them and their children that is safer, I say that is mending a broken family. That is not breaking a family. And so I hope that people see that, children are incredibly impacted by witnessing abuse, right? They're more likely to become abusers or become victims. And that's the cycle we want to stop.
Yeah. And sometimes, community members, even us, probably we don't sometimes recognize that this is abuse, because sometimes it gets so normalized, like verbal abuse gets so normalized, economic, financial abuse, that many times people may not understand that what is going on, it's abuse, not normal.
And that's the thing, right? Like this normalization of, well, every couple fights, that's true, but there should be respect and equality, even in your disagreements, and I think sometimes what we see in the media, what we see in our own families growing up, teaches us that, okay, verbal abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, even physical abuse is a normal part of a relationship, when it really shouldn't be, and it doesn't have to be.
And yeah, we have to work. We have to do a lot of work in that area.
Yes.
And
Well, this podcast is helping, right? Raise what. So I'm so appreciative for what you all are doing, getting the word out that we don't have to see it as normal, that abuse is not a part of a healthy relationship.
Yeah, of course. And we, all of us, whatever we can do, we are doing. Yes. And we hope that more people will join us in raising awareness. So before we talk about community engagement, let's talk about that. What are the unique challenges immigrant survivors face? In Daya, you help mostly immigrant survivors. So what kind of challenges they face?
So I think the first thing that comes to people's minds is language, right? Not knowing the language as well, or not being as proficient in English, because so many when you're dealing with these mainstream systems, you have to know the language. But it's not just the language proficiency for me, but it's also the vocabulary. A lot of times in the South Asian languages, there isn't the words there might be the words for hitting and yelling, but there may not be a word for like marital rape or sexual assault or a psychological abuse even, right? So and it's so powerful for a survivor to be able to tell their story in their own language. And even if they have to use like coded language or idioms that they, that are cultural to them, that our advocates at Daya, at Maitri as well, understand those things, that you don't have to explain your whole culture, that you're talking to people who understand it, who get it. But, also I think there's such a misunderstanding of mainstream systems, whether that's too much trust in mainstream systems, like We have many clients that think, oh, well, this is America and the legal system will ensure that the right thing happens. And that's not always the case. But also fear in mainstream systems, afraid to call the police, afraid to go to shelter. And that's because there is a cultural mismatch, right, between mainstream systems and immigrant survivors. They may not, there's a lack of cultural competence by our mainstream partners. As much as they are working and trying at improving that, it's going to take organizations like Daya, like Maitri, to bridge that gap so that people have culturally sensitive care and that they can tell their story in their own language, that they're not afraid about their immigration status or lack of immigration status, that, that they can talk about in-law abuse and that people validate that as a true kind of abuse, that people don't say to them, oh, well, it's not your husband hitting you. Mother-in-laws will be mother-in-laws. No, we're talking about real damaging abuse. And so I think those are the barriers that immigrant survivors face, is this cultural mismatch, the language access, and really the lack of knowledge or trust in mainstream systems.
And immigration status can be a control mechanism, that if you report that abuse,
it can be used as a tool of power and control for the abuser to say, well, I'm not going to do your immigration paperwork. And now you find yourself as a victim undocumented. And your abuser tells you, go ahead and call the police. I'll have you deported. And this is a very real fear. And especially, in a state like Texas, the fear is, it's a very rational fear.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And we are also seeing, I am sure that you are also seeing it, Daya, that transnational abandonment is a huge issue, challenges survivors, immigrant survivors, especially South Asian. We mostly primarily help South Asian survivors, and we are seeing that.
Absolutely. When we talk to judges and attorneys about transnational abandonment, they think, oh, this must be a one-off thing for somebody to take their spouse to back to the home country and then through manipulation leave them there, and then come back and file for divorce and claim abandonment and get full custody. They think, oh, this can't be that common, but it is that common. I know we see it, and abusers use this tactic quite a bit to slow down the process, to make sure that it looks like the victim is actually the abuser who's abandoned the whole family and has left them, when in fact they were the victim is the one who was left abandoned. So this is a really important topic that I believe the more we talk about it, the more that victims will also say, yeah, this happened to me.
Yeah, and marital rape that you touched, many times people are women from our culture, they are so not sure that whether they can talk about this it's a private topic, private issue, and
Absolutely.
they don't know if they can talk about it, if they can seek help. And in our culture, that sex and sexuality is such a private matter. We lack sex education. So probably sometimes victims, they don't know whether it is abuse or normal.
Absolutely. If we aren't talking to young people about consent, about the fact that sex should always be a choice, no matter what, no matter if it's your first time or your 500th time, it's each time is a decision that you're making together, and that sex should be, full of joy, full of mutual respect and love for each other, and it's not somebody's obligation, right, to have sex. And so I think it is very difficult, because when you get married, you hear like, oh, your duties as a wife, and what does that, and what does that entail? But that even when you're married, that you have the absolute rights and responsibility to consent every single time.
Yeah. So the challenges you just explained are so real, and all agencies that work with immigrant populations, we see these challenges every day. And that's why it is very important for us to advocate for right policies that can help immigrant survivors' needs. And it's similarly important to engage and educate community members so that they can join the movement to end violence against women.
In educating the community, inspiring the community to get involved, that is the most important thing. Because if we don't show, we have to demonstrate that this is an issue in our community and that our community is committed to ending it, that we care. And so that is what's going to change the laws, right? Is first we have to change minds and hearts, and then the laws will follow. But it does take that community support.
So since we are talking about community, do you have any message for our community members?
Yeah. So first of all, I thank the community for listening to this podcast, for engaging with our organizations, because that right there is the first step. That shows such a deep commitment that, first of all, you're saying domestic violence is real, it exists in our community. And then secondly, you're saying, and it has to stop, and we have to do something about it. So I think that anyone listening to this podcast has already taken two big steps to be in solidarity with survivors. And then I would say, what can you do next? Can you talk to your children about what does a healthy relationship look like? Can you take steps in your day to make all your relationships a little healthier, a little stronger? And can you call out healthy relationships when you see them? And then if you see somebody, if you know somebody, if you are somebody who's experiencing abuse, if it's a friend or a family member, to pull them aside privately and confidentially and say, I'm here for you. I believe you. You don't deserve this. And here's where you can get some professional help. And I think, and I'm sure at Maitri too, the number one way clients find out about our organizations is through community referrals. So to our community, you are that cornerstone. You are the reason that people can get help. And it is all about making sure that you have private, safe conversations with survivors, and you say, hey, I'm noticing this. It's uncomfortable to talk about, but to say, hey, I noticed this and I want to make sure you're okay. And if you need help, I'm happy to help you make these first phone calls to organizations that can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always good to call any organization because there's so many organizations that are helping survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and they're free and confidential.
Yes.
So you just, community members, they need to know about those organizations.
That's
and
right.
programs.
Don't try to take it all on your own. I always tell community members, you don't have to solve domestic violence. A lot of people say, well, it's a private matter. It's also a public health matter, but that is what we're here for. We have the training, we have the expertise, we have the funding to be able to help survivors so that the community doesn't have to say, oh, let me get involved. Let me talk to your husband. Come live at my house. We want to make sure everyone stays safe. And so it's important that the community knows that, you all in the community are such an important piece of this, but we're here to help you. And we're here with the expertise and with the resources to be able to make sure that we go about this in a safe way.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rachna, for sharing your wealth of knowledge, experience with us. And hopefully this discussion will motivate many of our listeners to support survivors, stop victim blaming, and hold perpetrators accountable. So domestic violence, this kind of abuse, never victims' fault.
It is not. That's right. And, I always say with holding abusers accountable, it's important that, again, when you see something happening, if you're in a place to be able to have a private conversation with somebody, do it, this is the best way to help survivors, is to tell them this is not your fault.
And I also hope that your client's testimony that we shared here today will encourage many victims to reach out to Daya or Maitri or any of their local agencies, organizations for support.
Absolutely. There is light, at the end of the tunnel. There's a way out, and we are all here to help you rebuild and reclaim your safety and your independence, and that you deserve it. Any survivor out there, you deserve to be healed, and you deserve a life that's free from abuse.
Exactly. So thank you, Rachna.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Listeners, I'm your host, Nandini Ray, signing off today, but I will be back soon with another interesting episode. Please keep listening to the Maitri podcast Between Friends, Conversations with Maitri, and find all our episodes on SoundCloud and wherever you find your podcast. We discuss important issues to end gender-based violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and we want all of you to listen to our podcast. Please be with us. Please like and share our podcast with your friends and families. So together we can make a society where all relationships are built on dignity, equity, and compassion. Please visit maitri.org, MAITRI, to learn about our free and confidential services. Please visit Daya's website, and please follow our social media pages, Maitri Bay Area social media pages. On those pages, we publish everything about our organization's work and about interesting articles. So please follow us. So bye for now. Stay safe and stay happy. Thank you so much for listening. This project was made possible by funding provided by Santa Clara County Office of Gender-Based Violence Prevention.
This show is for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as legal advice. Always consult an attorney for legal advice. Views expressed by guests of the radio show are individual opinions and not endorsed by Maitri.